Okay, so I will be talking about how there was an outbreak that involved a series of tornadoes, hail events, and strong thunderstorms with super severe consequences in Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, Tennessee, Alabama, Illinois, and Mississippi. So basically the Midwestern and a little bit of southern states. And it'll talk about how the events led to significant damages, including the destruction of homes, mobile homes, and infrastructure, and how power outages affected thousands of residents, and various areas experienced disruptions, such as fallen trees, damaged boat docks, and rail car incidents as well. The aftermath prompted federal disaster declarations with substantial financial aid approved for the affected states. The response to the disaster involved coordinated efforts from various authorities, such as FEMA, the National Weather Service, and state governments. And then local communities and organizations like American Red Cross and the Missouri Army National Guard played super crucial roles in aiding and supporting and providing relief to anybody in all the states, cities, and communities who were affected. This severe weather outbreak, which was one of the most devastating tornado outbreaks in Missouri's history specifically, gathered attention from the highest levels of government, with President George W. Bush issuing federal disaster declarations to expedite aid to these states. The Storm Prediction Center and National Weather Service weather forecast offices received commendations for their life-saving services during this challenging period, because they were great informants for people who were going through all of this series of events that were occurring through a lot of early May in 2003. And so, so first, let's talk about the environment and meteorological factors that affected this storm. So, a synoptic analysis of the environment and meteorological factors would be that it was a large-scale setup. So the outbreak occurred in the Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Illinois, Alabama, and Mississippi states, which indicated a synoptic scale weather pattern conducive to severe weather, which added the clash of contrasting air masses, also played a big role in the tornadoes especially. The warm and the moist air from the Gulf of Mexico was a key factor, because high dew points contributed to the instability which was needed for the severe thunderstorm that occurred during this time period. And the cold front interactions, because interactions with the cold front created a boundary where the warm, moist air lifted over the cool, drier air, and that can lead also to the development of severe thunderstorms. And then some meteorological factors would be that with the supercell thunderstorms, this outbreak was associated with the supercell thunderstorms, which had a rotating updraft known as a mesocyclone, and supercells are often responsible for producing strong tornadoes. The tornadoes were likely spawned by intense updrafts within the supercells. The F4 tornadoes indicated significant strength and destructive potential, which was possibly caused by multiple vortex structures within the tornadoes. And then the Fujita scale was used to categorize the tornadoes based upon the observed damage. So the F4 rating suggested that wind speeds occurred between 207 to 260 miles per hour. And then the tornadoes followed the various paths which affected different communities, and the variability in the damage indicated the fluctuations in the tornado strength and size along the paths that they took. And so damages to home infrastructure and power outages highlighted the local impacts of the tornadoes, and emergency response measures were implemented to mitigate casualties and aid the affected populations. Then the forecasts and the warnings that occurred were a collaborative effort between the National Weather Service, local emergency crews, and media. And they played a crucial role in minimizing casualties because they were able to get the word out about the storms. And then the uses of weather radar were used. They were used as instrumental detections in detecting rotation within the storms, aiding in tornado warnings. And the Fujita scale and damage assessments were used post-event to determine tornado intensity and track, which contributed to a better understanding of the outbreak. So the synoptic environment supporting warm, moist air interacting with the frontal boundary led to the development of supercell thunderstorms, which resulted in the significant tornado outbreak. So forecasting and warning systems also played a crucial role in mitigating the impact on communities in the affected regions. The human angle of the May 2003 severe weather outbreak paints a vivid picture of the impact on individuals and communities. So as tornadoes, hail events, and powerful thunderstorms wreaked havoc across all of the states, the lives of countless people were profoundly affected. In the aftermath of the tornado outbreak, numerous families found themselves grappling with the loss of homes and possessions. Mobile homes, a symbol of residence for many, were among the structures devastated by these storms. The destruction of infrastructure and widespread power outages further intensified the challenges faced by residents, leaving them without essential services and in some cases isolated from the rest of the region. Communities experienced the brunt of power outages, affecting not only homes, but also critical facilities like schools and hospitals. Emergency shelters became a refuge for those who lost access to electricity, water, and other necessities. Specifically, in Madison County, Tennessee, which was one of the states affected, emergency shelters were opened as the community coped with the aftermath of a tornado that disrupted their vital services. Individuals exhibited resilience and solidarity in the face of adversity. The response from organizations like the American Red Cross and Feed the Children, as well as the deployment of the Missouri Army National Guard, showcased a collective effort to provide aid, relief, and support to those affected. Relief crews and emergency response trucks were dispatched to deliver essential supplies, demonstrating a commitment to helping communities rebuild and recover. The personal experience of those directly impacted by the storms, as well as the efforts of local leaders and emergency responders, contribute to the human narrative of this weather event. Specifically, Governor Bob Holden's observations during his visits to Northmore, Missouri, and Pierce City underscored the emotional toll and devastation witnessed firsthand. The resilience of communities and the compassion demonstrated by individuals and organizations in this aftermath exemplified the strength of the human spirit in the face of natural disasters. The vulnerability of communities and societies to adverse weather, such as tornado outbreaks and severe thunderstorms, is influenced by a combination of social, economic, environmental, and infrastructural factors. Understanding these factors is crucial to how we understand how the communities and people in those communities coped with the aftermath and recuperated. So, with the geographic location, communities situated in regions prone to specific weather events like tornadoes and Tornado Alley are inherently more vulnerable. Geographic susceptibility increases the likelihood of frequent exposure to these adverse weather conditions. There are also socioeconomic factors, and low-income communities often face higher vulnerability due to their limited resources. Access to quality infrastructure, healthcare, and education may be compromised, which impacts the residents' ability to prepare for, cope with, and recover from these adverse weather effects. The quality and resilience of infrastructure, including buildings, roads, and utilities, also significantly impact vulnerability. The poorly constructed buildings are more likely to suffer damage, and inadequacies in transportation infrastructure can hinder evacuation and emergency response efforts. And with that, infrastructure is also a big point again, because people of lower socioeconomic value are most normally in those lower quality infrastructures, which puts them at a greater risk as well. And then the urban planning and land use is also a factor because inadequate urban planning, zoning regulations, and land use policies can contribute to increased vulnerability. Poorly planned communities may have a higher density of vulnerable structures or insufficient access to emergency services. Social cohesion and community engagement is important because communities with strong social networks and active community engagement often exhibit higher resilience. Close-knit communities are better equipped to provide mutual support during and after adverse weather effects, which fosters a sense of belonging and cooperation to these communities to help them recover faster. Early warning systems like the weather, the news, the forecasts are super important in emergency preparedness because the existence and effectiveness of these early warning systems significantly influence vulnerability. Communities with well-established alert systems and robust emergency preparedness measures can minimize the impact of adverse weather effects. Environmental sustainability is a great one. Practices that promote environmental sustainability, such as maintaining green spaces and implementing effective land management, contributes to community resilience. Healthy ecosystems often act as natural barriers, which mitigates the impact of extreme weather events for these communities. Access to information and education, which could go along with the weather system, early warning signs, could go along with communities having limited access to information and education would struggle to understand and respond to weather-related risks, whereas educational initiatives and accessible information can empower communities to make informed decisions and take protective measures when hearing about these giant winter storms where tornadoes occurred. And then climate change adaptation is a large one because communities that integrate climate change adaptation measures into their planning are better prepared and better positioned to address evolving weather patterns. Adaptable infrastructure and policies can mitigate the long-term impacts of changing climatic conditions, which this winter storm proved because it was May 2003 in the Midwest where all of these environmental factors should not have been happening, but they were, and if we were better adapted for climate change, the aftermath may not have been as severe. So, addressing all of these factors, you have to understand that an approach that would involve governmental agencies, community leaders, urban planners, and environmental advocates would greatly increase the chances of a better aftermath after these great winter storms. By uplifting the resilience at individual, community, and systemic levels, societies would be able to better withstand and recover from the challenges that are currently posed by weather adverse effects. Tying into how those factors contributed to the knowledge and the aftermath of the adverse winter storm effects could also be the environmental justice issue, where we could examine that the disproportionate impact of adverse weather on various communities in our case study would have to consider, again, the social, economic, and environmental factors. We can identify several factors in the tornado severe weather system because the Midwest does have a lot of environmental justice issues, especially in the Kansas City area. So this geographic location had certain areas were more prone to severe weather events due to their geographical location. The vulnerable communities that were located in tornado-prone regions may face more significant risks compared to those in less susceptible areas. The socioeconomic factor is huge in this because communities with lower socioeconomic status often have fewer resources to invest in the infrastructure, early warning systems, and disaster preparedness. These areas may lack adequate storm shelters and have a higher concentration of mobile homes, which are more susceptible to tornado damage. The design of the urban areas and the lower income and the quality of infrastructure also plays a crucial role. Older structures or poorly constructed buildings may not withstand severe weather, which increases the vulnerability of communities residing in or near those structures. Again, the access to information in these lower income communities may not be as great, because their ability to access timely and accurate weather information is essential for their preparedness, and they may not have access to that right away because of what their socioeconomic status allows. Communities with limited access to communication channels, such as the rural areas or just the people who can't afford cable television, might be less informed and consequently less prepared for these severe weather events. They also would suffer issues with the emergency response and healthcare systems because they're in the lower socioeconomic communities and are possibly viewed by the government as less important than the ones with the higher status. And the disparities in the emergency response capabilities and healthcare infrastructure can also lead to the varying levels of resilience. Communities with well-established emergency response plans and healthcare facilities may recover more swiftly than those with limited resources. Cultural and social dynamics can also influence their vulnerability. And the environmental justice is a huge issue because the consideration of environmental justice is crucial, as vulnerable communities may be disproportionately exposed to the environmental risks, such as this giant tornado storm. This can include factors like the location of the hazardous sites, which can exacerbate the impact of severe weather events. And analyzing these factors helps us understand the multifaceted nature of vulnerability and how certain communities may be more severely affected than others during these events.